Recurring tropes depicting Arabs and Muslims as barbaric and backwards sent me down a rabbit hole of resentment and alienation. With all the controversy surrounding 6 Days in Fallujah, I'm going to run down the psychology and politics behind the depiction of Arabs in gaming, why they're depicted as they are, and why the release of this game shows change is needed. First, a little side note. Arabs and Muslims are portrayed as homogeneous communities. This means they are stripped of nuance and individuality in opinions or in behaviour. Also, the extremely strong association of Arabs with Muslims means the stereotypes and tropes are extremely intertwined. So, most likely, what I'll be saying about one will link to the other. That being said, let's get into it. Where there's Arabs, there's the classic villain trope, especially in the post 9/11 era. Usually something like waves of terrorists or a brutal tyrant like Khalid al-Assad. To be honest, this is what most of the tropes in gaming are. Anyway, obviously this association is made everywhere in the media, and gaming is not an exception. Arabs feature heavily as one-dimensional antagonists or hordes in military-based action, shooters and other traditionally violent genres. Outside of these genres, there isn't much Arab representation.
You're overreacting!
Overreacting! Overreacting!
Some of you might be thinking, it's only a game, you Our attitudes and what we know about the world is heavily informed by the media and by pop culture. Over time, with constant reinforcing, what sociologists call othering takes place. Othering is a social cultural process where one group or culture defines and portrays another group as fundamentally different, the emphasis being their perceived superiority or foreignness. The imposed stereotypes and attitudes towards a foreign culture trickle down into society from the media and the ruling classes. In this case, the ingrained conflation between Arabs and Islam with violence or terrorism or repression is born. By searing these popular tropes into our subconscious, Arabs and Muslims as a whole are othered and therefore dehumanized, the opposite and lesser of the modern civilized Western man. This is what Arab American activist Edward Said called orientalism. He argued the reasons why Arabs and Muslims are represented as they are is inherently political. The image of the foreign, harsh and hostile Orient compared to the civilized and modern West is the backdrop for justifying wars in the Islamic world. You're desensitized. From years of shooting at them in games, being conditioned to see them as the enemy, you relate less and less to them. Basically, your whole quote-unquote experience of an entire people is predicated on stereotypes. You might think, the government says,
"Oh, we're gonna go in there and stop this madman. The country happens to have oil, but
and you think,
kill them all!"
No. But really, a 2013 study published in the Psychology of Violence journal supported this idea. Results of an experiment testing perceptions by gamers of a stereotype group depicted in violent and non-violent contexts suggested that general video game stereotypes primed negative and aggressive perceptions towards the stereotype group. Predictably, the effects worsened when the group was portrayed in a violent, terrorist context. Insanely though, the study found that the association between terrorism and Arabs is so ingrained that even terrorism-themed games without Arab characters intensified anti-Arab attitudes in the sampled population. Of course, this is just one study, and so we should take it with a grain of salt. But you get the point. You are what you consume. The thing is, some cultures and countries get a lot of convenient or comparatively harmless stereotypes, and others don't. Aside from the wider societal implications of these stereotypes, we should also talk about the effect this has on gamers who are being stereotyped. From my own experience, when I was younger, seeing those stereotypes everywhere made me extremely defensive. I'd be going out of my way to dispel stereotypes about my background. I think on some level I probably took in these associations. Having negative perceptions of your own identity, as you can imagine, is a massive burden. For me, it manifested mostly in the way that I felt like it was my duty to not misrepresent my background. I became extremely defensive and felt expected to verbally condemn every act of terrorism in the news or post some kind of pray for whatever trend, and if I didn't, you get it. So, now you might be thinking, come on, what's the end game with orientalism? Who benefits from this? Is it just ignorance from the developers? It is and it isn't. One of the reasons could be the military entertainment complex, the extensive ties between the entertainment industries and political institutions. In fact, this collaboration, for the most part, seems to benefit both parties. One gets to indirectly present a whitewashed picture of American-led wars to the public, while the other gets to piggyback off war fever and real-life trauma for profits. Another possible reason why I think these tropes go unchallenged in pop culture is because the Islamic world, and especially the Arab world, has shit PR. Arabs have virtually no soft power to fight their image globally. Look at the US, all the shit that it gets up to. Yet we have a really idealized perception of it, and that's because of soft power. In fairness, for the better or worse, there are certain Arab countries which are trying to have some kind of impact. Saudi Arabia bringing over sport icons, Qatar hosting the World Cup, and the UAE's tourism drive are changing things. Obviously, whether their intention is actually to promote their interest politically, or to genuinely improve the standing of the Arab world overall, who's to say? Anyway, obviously I can't prove that the developers of 6 Days in Fallujah are linked to the military entertainment complex, but I can absolutely make the case that they are continuing gaming's toxic legacy of dehumanizing people from Islamic cultures. The game's setting is meant to be inspired by the Battle of Fallujah in 2004, a very intense and notorious battle between the US and Iraqi insurgents. The bulk of the criticism for this game is that it trivializes the invasion, spinning the Iraq war as if it was ever some sort of humanitarian intervention to combat terrorism. Aside from the setting, the style and objective of the game has come into some real scrutiny. The game got some real flack for dehumanizing Iraqis and reducing their homes to hostile breeding grounds for terrorists. The reason for this? Procedurally generated maps. Basically what this is every time you play, the landscape of Fallujah is randomly generated, with new neighbourhoods to navigate, homes to invade, and just sounds wrong, doesn't it? But hold on, you might be thinking, we've got World War II games. Yes we do, but the big difference is that I'm not arguing that Allied involvement in the Second World War was an unjust cause. And from what I gather, we don't systematically marginalise or stereotype Germans. Either way, I'm not saying this game is even the root of the problem, it's just a symptom of a wider disease in pop culture. Anyway, it's not all doom and gloom.
We're getting Arab money! We're getting
There's definitely some positive depictions from mainstream developers, mostly from Ubisoft games and especially Assassin's Creed. Obviously, the very first title in 2007 featured an Arab protagonist, which was massively refreshing from the slew of content which was coming out at the time. Oh god. And to be fair, now we seem to have an even more wholesome view of the Arab and Islamic world with a genuine effort by Ubisoft to recreate Baghdad during the Islamic Golden Age. The main character, Basim, introduced in Assassin's Creed Valhalla as an important supporting character, is multi-dimensional and seems to not have been stripped of his background or whitewashed. Some other recent honourable mentions include Rashid in Street Fighter and Shahid in Tekken. All in all, the gaming industry seems to just be a reflection of the rest of the entertainment industry. As long as these negative depictions carry on, we need more positively depicted and multi-dimensional Arab and Muslim characters, so we can dilute the bad ones. 6 Days in Fallujah is a massive step backwards. Obviously, as adults, we shouldn't idolize game characters and all that. Regardless of how woke we might think we are to it all, they can still have a subconscious impact. I mean, I knew these stereotypes weren't true, but being bombarded with them wasn't great for my mental health. We need to dispel preconceived notions average gamers have about these groups, and we need more diversity and accountability with game developers and publishers. Anyway, I hope you've learned something from this video. Let me know what you think about this.